2005, the IEA was asked for advice on alternative energy scenarios and strategies for a clean, clever, and competitive energy future. This launched our 3 years G8 Gleneagles Plan of Action, which will conclude with a report to the Japanese presidency in 2008. Our work has already led to significant deliverables and has included a major outreach initiative with key emerging economies. Let me share with you a few of our findings today. First, energy efficiency. Our work for the G8 has identified that much more needs to be done to improve energy efficiency. After all, since 1990, energy efficiency improvement in IEA countries has been less than 1% per annum, half that of previous decade, and not nearly enough to stem the growth of CO2 emission. Our G8 plan of action also involves an ambitious programs on energy indicators. This work is aimed at developing a better understanding of how we are currently using energy and the various factors that drive or restrain demand. The result of this work will aid the development of energy efficiency standards and codes and identify policy best practices. We have come up with some valuable insights. For example, this chart clearly demonstrates that there has been a strong decoupling of energy use from manufacturing outputs, particularly in metal products, chemicals, non-metallic minerals, and paper and pulp. However, our work on energy indicators is far from complete. We still lack data for some key sectors and countries. If these gaps are to be filled, the support of industry will be needed. In this regard, I would like to reiterate my call for closer cooperation in terms of data transfer between the IEA and industry, particularly those of you involved in iron and steel, cement, chemicals, and paper and pulp. Timely, accurate, and comprehensive data about energy use, production levels, technology stocks, and other factors are all vital to producing the credible analysis that we are seeking to provide. We know that there are many issues and problems to be overcome, but it is my hope that meetings such as today's can help to build the trust and understanding necessary to underpin constructive and mutually beneficial cooperation. IEA analysis has identified that much more can be done. We have developed a list of 16 concrete recommendations for improving energy efficiency, covering all energy end uses, including buildings, transport, and lighting. These recommendations were endorsed by our leaders at the past 2 G8 summits. We are now waiting for them to be fully implemented, as this could save up to 5.7 gigatons of CO2 by 2030. Nearly a quarter of the reduction needed to meet the 450 stabilization case. So what is preventing these from being implemented? As you see in this slide, many of the policies to improve energy efficiency face real political, social, economic, and psychological hurdles and may even necessitate lifestyle change. The market failures or government legislation or regulations, or international cooperation on norms and standards. There are lots of things to be done. However, these various barriers need to be overcome. The triple win potential of energy efficiency, the higher economic performance, higher energy security, and less climate change is too strong to be ignored. Our message in terms of energy efficiency policy is clear: implement, implement, and implement. Now to the issue of technology. Long-term sustainability cannot be achieved through energy efficiency alone. Technology breakthrough will also be needed. Some argue that renewables are the answer, and yes, renewables have huge potential. They help diversify supply and they emit less CO2. However, they face a constraint, and that is cost. Most renewables, with the possible exception of wind, have not reached the technological maturity necessary for them to be cost-effective. Some argue that the solution is nuclear. And yes, nuclear is a very powerful, cost-effective way of producing huge amounts of electricity without any CO2 emission. But again, the nuclear alternative faces a major hurdle because public opinion remains unconvinced that a long-term safe solution has been found for the disposal and management of nuclear waste. In addition, long-term stable government policy is essential if the private sector is to have the confidence to undertake huge investment in nuclear. Some argue that fossil fuel, and in particular coal, could solve the problem. And it is true that coal is inexpensive and widely distributed geographically. The problem is that its use emits enormous amounts of CO2. Whilst carbon capture and storage seems particularly promising and would allow continued use of fossil fuel, there is as yet no full-scale demonstration using for a large-scale, globally commercial-sized power plants. We believe there is an urgent need for a large-scale, globally 10 plants or more international program to demonstrate alternative and promising forms of this technology, including in China and India, because they will remain heavily dependent on coal. In addition, clearly this CCS can only ever compete if there is a price or cost on carbon emissions. And also, clean development mechanism should cover this technology. As I have just outlined, each of the most promising new energy technology currently face their own unique barriers that are preventing their wider uptake. The key to overcoming these barriers is research and development. Unfortunately, it is not happening. There is an acute need to sharply increase energy-related R&D as current levels are not adequate given the magnitude of the climate change. Government R&D have fallen since the early 1980s, so to has the share to public sector energy R&D in total R&D. There is no evidence that private sector R&D has replaced the reduced public investment. This downward trend is energy R&D spending is in direct contrast to calls such as in the Stern report that a doubling of public R&D.